Today, we're going to learn about capturing motion. Shutter speed is not only the setting that allows us to capture perfectly sharp moving subjects, but also lets us capture the stars in the night sky. Our shutter speed is the speed at which our camera's shutter opens and closes. The shutter speed is displayed in either fractions of a second or in whole seconds. The smaller the fraction, the faster the shutter opens and closes, taking a photo, which allows less light into the camera's sensor. Using a fast shutter speed is really helpful in situations where you want to freeze movement, like when you're photographing wildlife, sports, or any action. On the other hand, the longer that the shutter is open, the more light that's going to enter the camera and the more movement, motion, or blur you're going to see in your image. This can be really helpful when creating images of silky smooth water, car light trails, or the beautiful northern lights. To summarize, using a faster shutter speed lets us freeze movement, but it also makes our photo darker. Using a slower shutter speed adds more light to our image and also more motion blur. The main takeaway is that our shutter speed can have a very big impact on the amount of light in our image and the resulting freezing or blur of motion. So it's really important to set it strategically. There are situations where you have your aperture wide open and your ISO set to your camera's highest recommended limit, but your image is still too dark. In these scenarios, we have two options. We can add an external light, or we can lower our shutter speed. If we need to capture a moving subject, then we would use an external flash to add more light. However, in most scenarios, like night photography, we're going to have to lower our shutter speed. This allows the camera shutter to be open longer, allowing the sensor to absorb more light, even more than the human eye, and you can get some really cool images. A key point to remember is that the longer that we keep our camera shutter open, the more chance of camera shake, which causes unintentional blur in our images. So we need to be prepared and use a tripod or other steady surface when necessary to help protect against this. Shutter priority. Let's change our cameras to shutter priority or TV mode on our main mode dial. TV stands for time value. In this mode, our camera enables us to set a single shutter speed setting, while it automates our other exposure settings, aperture and ISO, to fit the lighting of the environment. You control the shutter speed setting by turning this small dial on your camera. You will notice the values change as you move the wheel to the left for slower shutter speeds and to the right for faster shutter speeds. Generally, most cameras range from 1/8,000 for the fastest shutter speed and 30 seconds for our slowest shutter speed. As photographers, we set our shutter speed based on our subjects. Our shutter speed controls the amount of motion, blur, and light in our images. If we want sharp motion in our photos, or if we want to decrease the amount of light coming into our camera, we're going to use a fast shutter speed. If you notice any blur in your image, you should increase your shutter speed. It's also really important to remember that the faster that your subject is moving, the faster shutter speed you're going to need to freeze it in motion. If your subject is moving slowly or standing still, you can use a lot slower of a shutter speed. If you want blurred motion in your photos, or if you want to let more light into your camera, you're going to need a slower shutter speed. The keyword is motion. For instance, these mountains aren't moving anytime soon, but the clouds are. So a long exposure, a slower shutter speed, will allow us to get those wispy streak clouds while maintaining our sharp mountains. When to use each shutter speed. A shutter speed of 1/500 or faster gives us the ability to shoot fast-moving subjects like animals, cars, and sports. A shutter speed of 1/60 to 1/125 is perfect for portraits or day-to-day movement. A shutter speed of 1/5 to 2 seconds allows us to capture low-light environments and light effects. And a shutter speed of 5 seconds or longer is perfect for night photography, like when you're photographing star trails or the beautiful northern lights. Now that you've learned all about shutter speed, you're ready to take on aperture in our next lesson.